So, hello everyone, and thank you guys so much for joining us in our fourth and last panel for this entire 2-day Future of Work conference. We're so happy to have all of you guys here, and I'm honestly very honored to be hosting a panel discussing the new global leadership and what that will look like in the future. And before we begin, I really wanted to give a big thank you to all of our speakers that are here today, and also for Kriti to join us again for another panel and a really interesting discussion on what this pandemic has left for us and what it has taught us about what leadership requires and what it will look like in the future. So Kriti, I will give you the floor, and thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Isa. And just to introduce myself, I am a professor of leadership at IE Business School based in Madrid, and I'm going to be just moderating the session, right? So I study leadership, and the last year has given us tremendous opportunities to study and do research on what good and poor leadership looks like and what it should look like, right? So with that, I would like to introduce the panel a bit, and I might not be able to do full justice to who are on the panel in terms of your illustrious achievements. So don't feel shy, just pitch in and say, what is it that you've done? Maybe I just don't do that well, right? So Esther Molema, and you're joining us from Amsterdam, if I'm not wrong. Yes. So Esther is a keynote speaker on high performing performance organizations, and you do research on leadership, and we have, because I have a whole screen in front of me, so I'm also trying to spot where the panelists are. And we have Matt Stone. He's from Zalando and from Zurich or Switzerland, somewhere in Switzerland.
I'm in Bavaria at the moment.
So you're in Bavaria. And what I remember from our last conversation is that you said you're actually a COVID baby because you started your new job under the lockdown in COVID. And it would be really interesting for our audience to actually understand what is the experience of joining a new company remotely? What does onboarding look like? How do you make connections and build connections and so on, etc. Right? And we have Ujjaini, who is joining us from India. So we really, truly have a diverse panel because we also have covered different time zones, right? So Ujjaini, I know it's late in the night for you, but really, we really appreciate you having joined us. Jenny is the chief data officer of Z Entertainment. It's a multimedia media industry company, and she's leading their efforts to digitize, to do data analytics and everything to do with data. So in fact, I would say in a world which does not see many women in an industry like data analytics, like finance, Jenny is one of the few people who, one of the few women leaders in that space, right? So we would love to hear how your experience has been and what skills are working for you, right? And then we have Pino, who has just joined us. And Pino is a coach to CEOs and business owners. And so it's always fantastic to get an external point of view to who observe leaders, their idiosyncrasies, their craziness and their madness, right? So we will get more information on that. And with that, I want to give the floor to our panelists to maybe introduce themselves, something that you think needs to be highlighted for the benefit of the audience, for the benefit of the conversation that maybe I did not pick on. Esther, do you want to go first?
Okay. Well, I know you introduced me beautifully, and I'm very eager to hear from the other panelists as well about what they think about what leadership is all about. I study this, I help organizations to do so, and I have a special interest in unconscious bias and leadership for women. So what women do that outperform, men at this moment in leadership tasks. So lovely to hear what other people think, and lovely to tell a little bit more about it.
Thank you. Pino, over to you. And you're on mute. No, you're still on mute, Pino. We don't hear you. Yeah,
Sorry.
now.
Rocky beginning to my panel intervention. Okay, so as you said, I've been working in coaching to leaders for the last 16, 17 years, and I've been involved in women's organizations for most of that time as well. And I help people understand what they're not getting right yet, yeah? And in terms of women in leadership, I think that we need to focus on trusting ourselves more than anything, and getting back to our true nature, our true skills, and our ability to lead. It's not about others telling us that we can lead. It's about us believing that we're really good leaders, and then everybody will follow suit.
Thank you. And we also, as much as I remember from our last conversations, you have fantastic research also related to how we can learn from the animal world. And we would love to hear more about that as well. Okay, so Matt and Ujjaini, do you have something to add to your introductions before, or we just straight away dive into the questions?
Kriti, I think we can absolutely dive into it. You did a very good justice with the introduction of me.
Okay, and Matt, I also got your thumbs up. Okay, for the audience, I would like you to not just be listening in, but also giving us questions, right? So feel free at any point in time to type in the chat session, and from time to time, we'll pick those questions up, throw it to the audience, to the panel, and also open to everybody. And at the end, maybe if we have 5-10 minutes left, we'll also pick those up there, right? So with that, let's straight away go into this conversation about leaders and what leaders should look like, right? So 2020 has given us a glimpse of leaders, and actually we've seen them on TVs, we've seen them on our social media, we've actually have had a big exposure from corporate leaders who have had to come and face and talk about layoffs, firing people, from new leaders emerging from within the society, where with things like Black Lives Matter and these movements around climate change, for example. So the question of leaders and what leaders should look like and what good leaders are is kind of in our radar. So I want to give you that question and ask, what have we learned from last year? What is it that we look for in leaders? And if we want to be growing and developing as leaders, what are some of the skills that we need? So maybe I start with Esther.
Okay, thank you so much. I thought about, just thinking about this, what I see that great leaders in this time and age, in these unprecedented times, recognize that they cannot have all the answers themselves, that they don't know it all, that they are not the ones that, and I like it when they see that they listen to understand their people and not listen to reply anymore, just trying to get in grasp, like, what are experiences, what do you need from me? And I met this one great CEO that wrote an email to the whole organization asking to these people, tell me what you need. I cannot guess it. Tell me how I can help you. How can I keep you motivated? What do you need? What kind of services and help do you need? And so I believe that is a very important skill to have, and the understanding that you can show your vulnerability in these times and invite other people to help you, because no one has ever gone through these kind of times. This happens every 100 years, these unprecedented times. So listen to understand and not listen to reply right away.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Matt, to you.
So first of all, agree entirely with Esther. I think that's a really important factor, is leaders really understanding what people need. I think when I think about leadership and what I've seen emerge in the last year, it's around how and what leaders communicate. I think the time of the great person theory of leadership, where all a leader does is make great pronouncements of decisions, is gone. And the most successful leaders in the pandemic are ones that are not able to explain why, but how and what needs to happen. And if I think about my own experience watching my own political scenario every night with a political leader, a leader that doesn't dodge the difficult question and understands the reasoning behind a decision. Why is a lockdown extended? What are the numbers and facts? But to Esther's point, is also collegiate enough to say, when I don't know the answer, here's an expert that I trust that's going to bring that answer to life. I think that's something as well, this moving away from, as a leader, I have to know everything, to surrounding themselves with a collegiate style where they can bring other people into the conversation.
Very interesting. At this point, let me maybe invite Jenny into the conversation.
Thanks, Kriti. And I absolutely, agree with Esther and Matt about the listening skill part. Two things which I felt became very important during this time is having trust and also being able to come with empathy. I think these two are very, very important because you really can't see your colleagues, whether they are working. So any kind of thinking around micromanaging and not being able to trust your colleagues or the team members or subordinates, it's kind of gone. That's impossible. So first thing is you have to come with trust. And one thing I heard in one of our coaching session, you cannot build trust, you have to come with trust. So trust is like an endowment that you come with, and it cannot be built over time, it can only be broken. So it means that everyone has to learn and come with trust. Yes, if I can explain what needs to be done, then my colleagues will be doing it, my team member will be doing it, and I do not really require to micromanage. So that reduces a huge amount of panic situations when people are working remote. And the empathy is very, very important in these situations. Like I still remember one of our leader actually told that, I don't see really any problem because he has, household helps which are living, but not everyone actually has household helps who are living with the people. And during pandemic, we actually are just on ourselves. So it is not just working for the organization, it's also working for the home. Now if we as a leader do not come with empathy and understand the challenges other people are facing, it's absolutely impossible that we can really go through that.
Fantastic. And Pino, let's get you into the conversation.
Well, I agree with everything that has been said. For a long time, I have defined leadership as perfect adaptation to the context. And this year makes it more relevant and more clear than ever, yeah? Because there's so many skills you need to apply, and sometimes it's communication, and sometimes it's trust, and sometimes it's unconscious bias, and it really is about trusting your instinct. My slogan is embrace the wild, because our bodies and minds, our Homo sapiens technology is the result of millions of years of evolutionary R&D to produce an animal, a person that has a total capability to adapt to any kind of context. So our emotions, our instincts, our impulses, they are there to help us read the information in the context and adapt very quickly. And in this sense, I would compare it, I think we need to think of leadership as surfing a wave or skiing a slope or riding a horse, where you're not always thinking of what needs to be done now. You stop thinking and you start flowing with things as they're happening. And in order to do that, you need to be very much in tune with your emotions, your instincts, your senses, and you need to invest a lot of time and dedication to being calm and grounded. When you are grounded is when you best respond to situations. And I don't think that we've been putting enough emphasis on that in the last couple of decades, or the last 5 decades, if you like, in management culture. And this pandemic is making it more necessary than ever.
Wow, I think we've done a fantastic job together with the panel to lay out different skills that are needed, right? So it actually opens another set of questions that I'm going to share with the panel and see, just feel free, whoever wants to pick it up. things like trust, things like empathy, things like unconscious bias, emotional intelligence. How do we get trained for that? Some people might be born nicely with it already. Some people have learned it over the years, but now I don't have, as a leader, I don't really have the luxury of having years of experience to build it up. So are there some actionable tools that you could suggest that students, our audience, employees from different perspectives can pick these skills up, right? How do I cultivate empathy, emotional intelligence, trust?
Well, I would say that we're training that since we're children. That's what growing up is all about. We're learning how to use all of the tools in our bodies. And a lot of the training that our parents give us are about helping us to manage our emotions. However, when we reach adulthood, especially in our culture, because we train the rational mind a lot and we don't worry so much about the emotional aspect, we are overconfident and undercompetent in the management of our emotions and those of others, which means we're a lot worse at it than we think we are. And in that sense, my recommendation to anybody would be to look into getting some coaching. Some coaching is a very good place to start, either from your company, if your company is providing that service, or on your own, because there's coaches of all sizes. I mean, of all sizes, yes, and all prices. And also just follow your instinct and get into something that really drives you and really makes you feel great. Because, for example, martial arts can be a great way to learn how to manage your emotions. And boxing can be another great way. For me, horse riding was instrumental and has really changed the way I think about humans and interactions and managing. So follow your gut. I have friends who've learned a lot from running or from doing water sports. All of those really connect you to your body and make you realize that you're not so smart about the way you react as you thought you were.
Okay, Matt, can I invite you into the conversation?
Yeah, sure. I was thinking very much as Pino was talking there about, how we've evolved as a social species. And one of the most powerful mechanisms we have for learning with each other is storytelling. And I think one of the things that we can encourage people to do is to come together and tell their stories of their experiences. Because it teaches you to articulate what's going on in this wonderful human machine that we've evolved. But also, by listening to and hearing other people's stories, we gain empathy. That's where we learn our empathy from. I mean, I remember my parents reading to me my stories at nighttime and learning about emotions and feelings and quests. So one of the things I would encourage people to do is come together as peer groups and share your experiences as stories, whether that be something you've learned on a course, something where you have experienced in your life during the pandemic, or even asking yourself the questions and doing some of that working out loud. But I think storytelling can be a very, very powerful medium of building that emotional intelligence side of leadership.
Yeah, so it is opening a new set of questions for our conversation. But before I get into that, I want to go to Esther, especially also because you brought out the question of listening, right? So or the skill of listening. So with listening skills, how can I develop better listening skills, or any other skills that you have in mind, some actionable tools for all of us?
Well, I wanted to get back to that whole idea, and then maybe actionable tools to learn it, is that what we have done in the past a lot is that we have put people in leadership position that have a lot of privileges that they were born into. People that the privileges that you were born into, and we gave you the leadership, we made you talk, you could interrupt us, very easily, because you had the luck of having the right social class, the luck of having a certain skin color, the luck of of all these things. And so what we find in our research is, and don't know if the others agree, and I would love to hear, is that the people that are more in the outer group have practiced more to learn themselves these skills. They have been better listeners. They've learned to be better listeners. They have learned harder to inspire other people. And they've worked on those skills harder to get into the same positions. So I believe that there's practical skills how to do it. We should also look for different people to lead us. And we should look at the people that have practiced this in the past. And for example, just to show you, when we ask blindly people, and we give them 9 capabilities of leadership, and then ask them, which ones do you need in your organization more in the future and now to overcome this period and to get better? And people pick the qualities that are about empathy and about listening that the outer group has practiced. And for example, then they call out at least 90% of the capabilities they want, that we know that women have practiced them more to get to the position they want to go into. So what we see is that I do agree with Matt that you can learn by getting more empathy, but it might go way too slow if you want to touch the pandemic, to work on Black Lives Matter. So we need to look also for a new group that have practiced this already, that needed this to get seen and valued and heard before already.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ujjani, what are your thoughts?
What I personally feel is that coaching and getting mentored is actually very, very important to be able to build this kind of skill sets. And also, I think our upbringing has a lot into it. And people like us who are actually probably the parents for the next generation, this is the best time that we actually teach at the very early age the basic values of life, instead of pushing them to learn some coding skills or some mathematics or something. I think it's very important that we teach them. What worked for me somehow is actually yoga and meditation, and these are the two things that connected me to myself far more and helped me understand who I am. Many a times I have seen that leaders, they themselves don't know who they are, and that actually kind of not able them to be grounded and be authentic to the true selves. So once we can quest for who we are and what I can do, what's my purpose, and therefore how do I drive, I think being grounded, as Pino was talking about, that's really will be coming out. And meditation and yoga helped me absolutely great way for to be able to do whatever I could do.
So this is a fantastic segue into what I wanted to discuss next about the idea. And you've already, Pino and Jen, you've already started bringing this out. In one of the things we have seen in the pandemic is leaders have had to deal with a lot of grief, right? People losing their jobs, people losing lives, family members losing lives, right? So long COVID diseases, etc. So in all of that, leaders can start losing themselves. Of course, there is already the pressure of crisis, there's already the pressure of pandemic, but also this whole dealing with losses and grief and so on. So in that, I believe managing oneself, being grounded, staying true to yourself becomes even more relevant. And so what is it, some things that we could do when we need to develop these skills of self-awareness, self-discovery, and self-mastery, right? So what are some of the actionable things that you could do? And I think, Pino, you already started laying out things like, do sport, do boxing, do things that actually are not part of your job, to start knowing where your element is, where your X factor is. And Jenny, you started talking about already the ideas of meditation and yoga, right? So I want to bring in some more ideas on this from Matt, Esther, also from Jenny and Pino, right? So what is it that we could do in terms of leading ourselves?
Yeah, so if I can start, Matt, if that is okay, just and then I hope that you hop in and the other ones as well, is that I believe that what we see in the literature as well is that it's very important that you leave your people, you give them a certain, they can pick their own routine in the day so that they can stick to their own routine. So if it's like walking in the morning or do yoga or do whatever, but they can, or having a great breakfast or, running, it doesn't matter, but ask people, what you need to keep sane and get yourself, and what routine would you like to follow? It could also be that people say, I would like to not be in meetings or whatever from 4 o'clock in the afternoon to 8 o'clock at night, because I would like to take care of my kids. I'm homeschooling them. And then I don't mind working a little bit after that, but could we please keep, could we please honor that? And so that in a team, people will say, this is the routine I need to keep sane in these difficult times. And then honor that. And some people will say, love to start in the morning, and other people will say, and I've met even an organization where they said every 5th week, we don't do any internal meetings, just that every the fifth week, people can regenerate again a little bit from not being in calls constantly. But that is the week where we internally don't have calls. So if you can really find out, you can take longer walks, you can do things to make sure that you keep sane in the longer run. And as Kirti said, I think that is very good, that if you cannot take care of other people as a leader if you don't take care of yourself extremely well. So show people how to stick to routines. Show people how important it is to do so, and honor other. And I know exactly, and from research we know exactly that especially the morning routine, especially keeping to your morning routine, whatever that is, keeps you more productive during the day. It helps you to keep sane during the day. Matt.
Very interesting, Esther. I think what we have seen from a lot of experiences is actually the opposite, right? A lot of people who work have not been able to keep their routines, or not their morning routines, or even the time to shower, for example, right? So it's actually those seemingly small things that actually can create a lot of groundedness in ourselves as well. Okay, let's pass it on to Matt, and let's hear from you.
Yeah, we had a senior leadership offsite in January, and this is one of the questions we asked our leaders, which is, what are you doing to look after yourself? Because if you think about the old airline safety card, anyone remember flying when we used to do that? And they always talk to you in the airline safety briefing, put on your own mask before helping others. So we asked that question: what are you doing to recover yourself? 3 things came out as the most common things our leaders are doing right now. The first one is exercise. So whether it be a walk, a run, some weightlifting, some yoga, but everyone who is feeling on top of themselves is doing some physical exercise. The second thing is time with nature. So spending time in, if you can, the nature, whether it be green, whether it be the beach, whether it be mountains, the snow, but spending time in the natural world is very replenishing for the soul and the mind. And the third thing, and I found this quite a contradiction, was actually scheduling more one-to-one time with their teammates. Because what they were finding is so many group Zoom meetings were really, really meaningful and getting work done, but they were losing individual connection with people. So they were really doubling down on that individual connection that allowed the leaders the psychological safety to open up a little bit more about their own circumstances and work through some of their own issues.
And let me ask Jenny and Pino, do you want to add some more ideas and actionable tools for everybody who's listening, how we can manage ourselves better?
I think, Kriti, one thing I found is very interesting is to slow down a bit. I mean, in our normal life before pandemic, I mean, I have seen people were literally running, rushing to do so many things without really knowing that they are running for what, right? And we were doing so many meetings, but without knowing what is the outcome we really want out of them. So um, my personal sense, and I have seen a good success in that, is at times it is good to just slow down, just be with your family members, ensure that at least one meal you have with your family, and do not accept any phone calls when you are grabbing your dinner or breakfast, whichever is that meal time. So actually being able to connect and at times slowing down really helps a lot. And I haven't seen any kind of productivity loss by doing actually that slowdown. And I think, Esther exactly mentioned, like, what the 5th week, probably we will not do any meeting. So different companies did it differently. So, I think, my mantra was slow down, relax, world is not going to end, and nothing is going to change. So even if you grab a meal properly, it's okay.
Yeah, I love everything that my colleagues are saying, because slowing down is critical to understanding what's really going on about yourself, because emotions start slow. So if you're running around, you won't know you're stressed until you're up at the peak. It's so important to have order as well, as Esther was saying, having routine and order. In fact, it's what we do to relax horses. When horses are very much out of themselves, we make them slow down into an orderly movement, and the order helps them relax. So order is very calming to all mammal animals of all species. And of course, what Matt said about starting with your own mask is critical. There's no way you're going to be able to lead anybody else if you don't lead yourself first and take care of what you need. And, my slogan is embrace the wild. So of course, nature and moving around in nature would be critical. But I'm going to add one more thing. And it's, we wouldn't call it leadership if it was easy. There is nothing easy about leading people, especially in times like these. And the one thing that we really need to do, and that we're never talking about, is embrace grief. And I'm very serious about this, because we have been living in a culture of success, happiness, Instagram fantasy, and achievement of results. And we're obsessed with getting it right all the time. And getting it right mode turns you away and disconnects you completely from your emotions. And when there is grief in your heart, that grief has to come out. You can't do it any faster than it has to be done. You can't make it happen now and in a hurry. You just have to flow with it, embrace it, understand it, and let it express it in a safe space. And a safe space is a place where nobody sees you, nobody's going to judge you, and where those emotions are not going to break anything you care about. So you don't vomit them on your couple, on your husband or wife. You don't vomit them on your children or on your boss or on your team or on the poor guy at the gas station who got it wrong with your car. You take your negative emotions, your grief, your anger, your fear, your frustration, everything you have, and you let it out in a space where nobody can see you. And if you do that regularly, it's better than taking a run or going on a hike, because it discharges you of all of this excessive tension, and it allows you to get grounded again and see where to start. And you see, emotions or grief are like water. I often talk about skiing and surfing, because it's a wave can be huge. And a big wave in the beach, we've all been in a beach, and a big wave came over us and it threw us on the ground, and we didn't know where the floor was. We lost all of our references. We swallowed water. We felt helpless for a while. Well, that is what grief and anger and fear do to you in times like these. And all you have to do, and all you can do, is breathe. I'm always talking about breathe big and soft. Don't breathe like sports people choreographing. Stop controlling your breath. Make it more like a sigh, and just keep breathing until it's gone. Just let it out slowly and embrace it, because in my experience, all grief tells you something wonderful about who you are, where you came from, and the prices that you have paid to become who you are. And if you don't embrace that grief, you will never become the best version of yourself.
Thank you for that conversation that we've had. So I hope our listeners, our audience, people who've joined us are finding this hugely insightful, and that every single moment seems to be like a moment of wisdom, right? So I hope we are able to take notes. We are able to record this conversation. I think we are recording so that we can revisit. There is so much practical, actionable stuff that we are discussing here. So with that, let me switch the gears a little bit, and let me actually throw this question to Matt first, because yes, you are the COVID baby. That's what you have said before, right? So just to recap for people who joined us a little late, right? Matt started his new position in Zalando with totally remotely online. So I think he's never been to office before. And one of the things that I want to actually talk about, and as a next question, is as leaders, there is kind of the contradiction, a challenge that is emerging. On one hand, we want to build trust and we want to empower people and do not micromanage. But on the other hand, we have the risk of losing out on our connections, on what the culture of the organization is. And so there is this tendency, especially from managers, to overmanage, to micromanage. We've seen, at least in the pandemic, early years, months of the pandemic, we saw companies trying to look for information or the data that was being collected on Microsoft Office in terms of the number of hours people are spending in Office, number of emails, number of meetings. So because the data was being collected already, it was being used. And of course, later people realized maybe that's not the right way. So the question is, how difficult or how different it has become for us to be able to lead in a hybrid environment where we've never met each other, right? And I think you already, Matt, started with the idea of let's have one-to-one meetings and conversations. So do you want to elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, I think there's been a couple of challenges for me joining a new organization. So the first one is not having pre-existing relationships, not knowing who my stakeholders are. So something as simple as just not knowing who I need to partner with to get things done. So the process of onboarding for me was needed to be less about the company's history and background and more about who are the people and who do you need to influence and what's the political landscape within the organization, because I have no awareness of that now, nearly a year later. And I'm still repeatedly bumping into projects that I should have shared with someone, but I didn't even know that person existed. I think the second thing is that how much work gets done in microtransactions, right? So irrespective of your schedule, just bumping into somebody in the coffee corner and them saying, oh, by the way, did you know about this project? Or by the way, did you get my email about? So much business happens that way. When that's not happening, I constantly feel I'm behind the curve on a lot of topics. So that's something we need to solve for in the future, is how do we make sure those water cooler moments still happen when we're working in a hybrid model? I think the number one challenge, however, and I used to work for a truly global organization where we used to operate meetings in 3 time zones. So Asian time zone, European time zone, and American time zone. And everybody in the European time zone would get together in a meeting room, and then everybody else would be dialing in remotely. And it is incredibly disruptive. And I think when we move to a hybrid model where some are in the office and some are at home, it is going to be even more important for leaders to pay attention to those who aren't in the room, because the voices you don't hear are normally the ones that have a challenge. I used to be a first aid instructor. What they used to teach us is when you arrive at the scene of an accident, don't go to the noisy people first, you go to the quiet ones because you don't know they're breathing. And I think when we work in a hybrid model, people that are working remotely will be very quiet, and we have to make sure we check in on them consciously and explicitly.
Yeah, so thank you. As we move to the other panelists, I want to throw also a question that's in the chat for whoever wants to address it. So this question basically is saying that the leadership kind of has also changed with this digital world. In a face-to-face, in a setting face-to-face, anybody could speak up, and it was not about hierarchy, right? It was about, okay, I have an idea and I could speak up and I could inspire and lead others. But in a kind of a digital setup where everybody is kind of on mute and just listening in, it is rather becoming difficult for these new leaders to come in. And so what's your take on that as well as we go through the challenges of the hybrid world?
Hallo. Echt?
Hi, Cindy. Do you want to speak or?
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Okay.
maybe I could jump in and say something quickly on that, and then open up to my colleagues. One of the things that I've been reflecting on a lot is I think female leaders get so much feedback about being visible. You need to be more visible. As a man, I've never had that feedback before. And I know a lot of female leaders that get that feedback all of the time. And I think this is going to be a really, really key challenge, is how do you make yourself visible in a very static hierarchy like a Zoom meeting like this? And I'd love to hear what my fellow panelists think about that feedback that women get and how we can do that, particularly working in a hybrid model.
Well, what I think that you need to adapt to the technology. And the technology is going to have to adapt. It's going to have to develop a lot faster because we've rapidly found the limitations of Zoom, yeah? But right now, the tool you have is the chat. So start by using the chat. You have something to say it on the chat, okay? And hopefully somebody is going to be looking at that and noticing that. You can ask to speak on the chat. You can use the buttons down here to put a reaction up and say, I love this, or I don't, there aren't any negative buttons, are there? I'm seeing they're all clapping and hearts and blah, 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 but I can do something. So first, play with what you have and see how far that gets you. Second, use the one-on-one meetings. Call your boss up, write an email, write a WhatsApp and say, I have an idea, I have input, this is what I think we should do. Yeah, and work with human resources. Give them feedback. Say, look, we need to do something better about our meetings, or we need more hybrid environments, or we need meetings where we're not all on mute. We need to have a space in every meeting where you go around the table. Like, this is the kind of stuff that I advise companies to do, is when all the conversation is transactional, there's no space for the emotions to flow, which is kind of the water cooler moments that Matt was talking about. All of that informal interaction is gone. It's like, who's watering the plants in the office? They must all be dead. Well, it's the same thing with all of the informal interactions, the lunch spaces, the coffees, the walking around the corridor, the walking into an open space and seeing your boss or your colleague 20 meters away and knowing he was in a bad mood. All of that is gone. So as companies, as human resources, needs to create the spaces where that begins to happen. And that means creating interactions among employees that aren't about work. And for example, the other day I saw Nokia was showing that they had all of a team of employees doing aerobic on Zoom. So they were all together on Zoom doing aerobic. Or guys at La Caixa were telling me that they have what they call un cocido virtual. And a cocido is a traditional Spanish dish. And what they did was send this food, this takeout, to all of the guys on the team and schedule a lunch on Zoom at the same time where they were all eating the food that they got and just talking informally. So I think companies need to build in a lot of those kinds of informal interactions that didn't used to happen before, and really plan for developments on the technology that allow a lot more interaction, like polling and informal, and allowing people to have more liberty to come into the conversation without interrupting it.
Yeah, and if I can add to you, Pino, I think that is wonderful advice, and the same with Matt. But I'd also think, and that's what we're working on with a lot of companies, is to not do it one-off, but to build like a calendar of events for the year, where I will be speaking to my boss 2 weeks from now, one-on-one, and I know that somebody else will talk about, about their hobby or so, to make sure that it's not always about work, and that you plan it like a social influencer, in a calendar where everybody knows that it has a rhythm and it's predictable. So if I don't feel very well on a day, but I know I will be speaking to Matt, who is my boss, in the next week, I know, I can save that up for when we speak. And in the older times, we needed to see the people that we work with quite a bit, 6 times a year, not speak about our work, but just speak about who we are as people, 4 to 6. And we need to add, to really increase that, to have that same effect online. And so I believe that great leaders, build that calendar first. How much contact do people need? What do they need? Discuss it with their teams. What do you need? How are we going to build buddy systems? How are we going to do that? And if that is done, you look at the content of the work. But my people get the attention they need to deliver.
Yeah, fantastic advice. Thank you. So let me actually move to Jenny, and with that, I want to actually change the question a bit and give it a twist, especially for Jenny, because you are the data scientist in the room, right? One of the few women who have taken on that field. So, and I think Matt already started this conversation when he said women have to become more visible, and they have to speak up more, right? And what we have learned from all the research and the statistics that's coming out from last year is that women have been disproportionately hit by the pandemic, right? A lot of women have had to take step back, have to take on child responsibilities or family, old parents' responsibilities, etc. So there's been a lot of compromise around that as well. So what is it that we need to do as a society, or what is it that I as a woman, and many of us are who are listening in, need to do to continue with the conviction that we can continue to be the leader, and lead ourselves and others, and especially in a space where it is already a hugely male dominated kind of industry?
That's a really, nice question, Kriti. So what I have found, and in my team particularly, even though you don't necessarily see a lot of data and technology people and technology ladies, at least in my team I have at least 25 to 27% presence of lady data scientists, and I have ensured that I purposefully do that, and I also work around mentoring and teaching lots of budding lady data scientist particularly. So what I have done in this during this process, um, instead of, so for example, one of my colleague actually had twin daughters, and for her it was becoming very difficult. In the middle of meetings, those daughters will always come in and will jump around and will try to say something, because for them it's like a fun, right? um, and what she told to her daughters, that, like, you have a class teacher in your school, she is my class teacher, so if you do some nuisance, she's going to scold you. But then, what the kind of changes we actually did is, instead of literally trying to do everything by ourselves, what happens for women, when we go back home, we feel like that's my responsibility. I think, the way we delegate the jobs at office, we have to wear the same hat at home also, and we have to learn how can we delegate the jobs even at home. For example, like, if you have kids at home, it's very important that they understand how important it is your career to you, so that they also learn that when they will grow up, their career is equally important. And therefore sharing some of the household works, whether it is cleaning the house, or cleaning the clothes, or drying the clothes, those kind of things which they can do, it's equally important that they start sharing. And it's also important that all the family members have that kind of delegation, because in Indian culture, men generally don't take take more care of the kids. But once we can have a very open conversation, and also create the sense of job delegation at home, so that you can take care of your career and have a very clear focus at it, it's very, very important. So that sense equally important, like, as we expect that company will be empathetic about what we are going through, our family, we have to create that sense of empathy within the family, so that they also see the career for this women is equally important, and our kids also learns by seeing that career is important for everyone.
If I can jump in there a minute, Preeti, I completely agree with Ujjani. It's about a lot more delegation and a lot more negotiation, because of course your husband is not going to do it the first time you ask. You're going to have to ask 5 times. And that's just an example, no? And of course the kids don't understand it the first time, but you're going to have to make it clear to them 5 times before they adapt to you protecting your space. And just, if I can give an example I always give of leadership, it's the best example I ever saw. And it's a female horse called Lorca, who was the leader of the pack where I learned to ride. And when Lorca lifted her hind leg from the floor 3 centimeters, all of the horses in the herd got in line. So with a minimum effort of the leader, there was a maximum impact in the whole herd. And that is what we need to aspire to do as women, because women are often the leaders of their families. So it's true what Matt was saying, all of this business of having to be visible. It's not natural for women to be looking for visibility all the time. That's typically alpha male behavior. Alpha males are always look at me, look at me, look at me. So alpha males built organizations, and now we're saying to women, look, you have to be like alpha males because this is what everybody else does. But in my experience, that doesn't work and it doesn't come naturally. You just need to be the one that gets everybody in line with a good look. And that takes a lot of training.
Wow. Okay. So I have to invite, let me ask Isa, because you have written a question in the chat. And do you want to just elaborate that question for the audience, for our panelists?
Yeah. So we've had an event with another speaker for the gender gap in technology, for instance, and it's specifically also to do, and the speaker that we had focused a lot on the retention rate. So it's not just about representing women and making sure that we employ enough women, but it's also creating a safe space where they feel like they belong and they want to stay. Because what we're seeing is that the rate of women quitting is a lot higher in industries where they're not represented. So my question was kind of more along the lines of, where do you think, who's to blame here, you know?
So if, I can go first on this. I personally believe that if you are taking care, if it is your career and ultimate owner is yourself. So you can expect others to do something. You may expect your parents to do something, spouse to do something, colleagues to do something. But ultimately, if you don't own it, it's not going to happen. So whatever be the help that you may expect. So my first point is, you have to believe that you can do. You have to understand who are your ambassadors, who are your allies, who actually is going to motivate you, help you, mentor you, or coach you. And you have to also have that dream big, that yes, I can do and I will do it. I always feel like, I think Pino was also talking about, women are more like water. And we really don't stop. Like even in your family or anywhere, you will find women generally try to figure out a way to go ahead, right? So if you always have that attitude that I'm not going to give up, whatever happens, I will figure out a way and I will go ahead, I don't think anyone can stop you. And it is also equally important that for the future generations, whether you have a sister, younger sister at home, or a very girl kids, it's important that we teach them that you can dream big, and everybody is here. You have to just believe in yourself. Kriti, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Jenny. Fantastic advice. We have 5 minutes left, and that actually brings me to a very nice segue to the last question that I have. We'll have maybe 30 seconds, 40 seconds, not more per panelist. But the question that I would like us to address is, we people who are listening in right now, people who've joined us, most of us are super ambitious. We want to do big. We want to dream big. What is it that I can cultivate to be the leader? What is it that I can cultivate to continue dreaming big and doing big?
If I
Esther, maybe we start with you.
Yeah, when I believe that, listeners, if you want to dream big, always have 5 ambitions, 5 ideas what you could be doing next. Ideas that go, I can be the president of something, I can be this, but always have 5 ideas, because if one doesn't happen, you have 4 more ideas. And the next day you can put a new one on your list. Don't let anyone stop you where you want to go. Don't become dependent on one boss or one organization. Have ideas about what is your next step and be very creative of what that can be. and put in the Cinderella rule. I think the Cinderella rule is if something doesn't happen, if what you really want, one of those ambitions, cry until midnight and do all the grieving you need to do, and then get on there the next day and put something up, cross that one thing out and put something new on the list. And you will be as successful as you are now in this, I hope.
I would build back on what Yanni said and say, look, it all starts with you. If your dreams and your ambitions are outside of yourself, you're in trouble. Look inside. It's like Carl Jung said, to look outside is to dream, to look inside is to awaken. So get to know yourself and choose the opportunities that help you thrive. Don't try to do things that don't go with you.
Matt, over to you.
Yeah, I would say dream big in terms of output. So what you want to deliver, don't get sucked into the trap of thinking that big input is the way to get there. I think we are so focused on input and the hours that we work and how busy we are, we forget that some of the greatest outcomes can be from the simplest ideas. So think big, but think big output. Don't get sucked into the rat race of big input.
Fantastic. And Jenny, any last thoughts from your side?
I would say absolutely ignore, any naysayers. So anyone who is going to put you down, just ignore them. Don't, break your dream anytime. And just have trust on yourself. And one day it will be good and you will do it.
Wow, thank you so much, everybody on the panel as well. I hope you all have enjoyed the conversation as much as I have. And I think there is a lot that we have learned through this whole 1 hour of discussion, right? So again, thank you so much, everybody who's contributed, who's listened in, who's joined in. We, on behalf of the panel, I'm saying that, but I think we agree that if you want to continue the conversations, do join us on LinkedIn, just reach out to us, and we would be happy to take this forward, right? So with that, we are doing the closing of our last panel, and there is a cocktail. So I don't know if maybe somebody from the Women in Business Club want to just take us through that.
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us, all the speakers, Matt, Esther, Jenny, Pino, and Kriti. Thank you so much for all your support. We also want to take a minute to thank IE Women Initiative, Campus Life, and Talent and Careers, and of course, IE Foundation for being such a support to us. In the end, we just want to say and conclude that the world of work is changing. While some jobs will be lost, many others will be created, and almost all will change. And I now would love to invite you all to the cocktail hours with our guest speakers, and it would be moderated by Elisa, who's one of our biggest supporters. And we will have a small cocktail session, networking, a Kahoot quiz, sponsored by Deliveroo. So thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. So, if you want, I can share my screen. I will be sharing the Kahoot. 1 second.
Great. Looks like we still have about 22 of you online. This is great.
Okay. We will send 20 Deliveroo codes, I believe. So yeah, if you stay, I'm sure you will probably get one. So okay, 1 second.
Great, you're saying it now as everyone else is dropping off.
Okay.
Great. So to warm up, right, the Kahoot.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Whenever everyone please register with your name and last name so that we know who you are if you win.
I don't get what we're supposed to do. Are we supposed to log into kahoot.it?
Exactly, yeah, go to kahoot.it and then you need to enter the game PIN, which is 788217.
Great. Looks like we have 9 of you already. 10.
Okay. Okay, let's wait a couple of minutes more.
I just shared the link in the
Oh, thank you,
chat as
Lisa.
well if anyone needs it.
Perfect. Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay.
So, can I ask something? Pino
Yeah, of course.
comes from is a full name, or does it is it short for something else? Is it
For Pinot, you're the speaker for.
Me.
Yeah.
Yes. Pino it means pine tree, and it's Maria del Pino. It's a typical name of the Canary Islands because a virgin supposedly appeared on a pine tree. We do this in Spain all the time. In fact, there was no such virgin. It was a very sacred tree to the indigenous populations, and the Spanish conquerors decided to convert that tree into a Virgin Mary.
I had no idea. But yeah, there are so many virgin, like usually at least I have 2 villages, and many women of those villages are named with the name of the virgin. Like for example, this is a really weird name, but Soterraña. Yeah, and so yeah, it's in Segovia, and some women are named like Soterraña.
Yeah, but we have Virgin of the Path, Virgin of the Valley, Virgin of the Sea, Virgin of the Pillar.
Yeah.
Spanish women's names are virgins because she appeared somewhere.
Yeah. Okay, 16 people, maybe. Okay, let's wait 1 more minute and then we'll start. So make sure that you register.
And when we start, are we getting off Zoom and on to Kahoot, or where are we operating?
No, I will explain. So when we start, there will be 6 questions with 4 options, and you have 30 seconds to answer.
And the questions are on Kahoot?
Yes, the questions will appear on Kahoot.
Yeah, the questions will appear in the screen that you're viewing in Zoom, but the answers will need to be plugged in via wherever you put it, the game pin in.
Okay, that's what I needed to hear.
Oh, sorry.
But also, I think time counts. So if you're faster, right, you get more points.
Oh, 50-50. It's 2, right? Between 2 choices.